I've gotten great value from the B2B SaaS focused content library, from my circle group, a small number of peers that meet every month, and from the workshops that Alex organizes with top people. If Alex was running acting workshops, he would have a How to Cry in Movies workshop and bring along his best pal, Tom Hanks. I mean, it really is quality people that he organizes.
Hey, it's Alex Suma here, CEO founder of SaaStock, and welcome to this episode of the SaaS Revolution Show. Today, our guest is Osvaldo Spadano, who is the CEO and founder of Akoova. Osvaldo is also a second-time founder, and he's going to take us through the launching of Akoova and his lessons and some of the learnings from being a second-time founder as well. So let's tune in and listen to the show.
When I went to high school, I got into computer science as a result of a plot that I made to study away from my lovely hometown. And so it was kind of accidental. I didn't really mean to do computer science, but at the end, I fell in love with it. Around in 1989, so you can see I'm quite old, I had my first work experience, and I joined soon after the high school finished, Biomedical Research Center. And that's when I've started to get in touch with the internet, which obviously was very much present at that time in the academia research world. And I spent around 6 years in the research center, which was a fantastic experience. I must say, my best experience, being surrounded by very, very clever people, lovely people, and learned a lot. And then I went into business. So there was my first startup in 1995, I think, or six, I can't remember exactly. And I set up an internet service provider in Italy. Then in 97 I came to UK. I joined a company at that time called Made, which then became the Darrow Corporation, and that's where I met the CEO of the company. It was a public company, and the CEO, I think, was at that time one of the youngest CEO of a public company called Dan Wagner. And with him, then in 2001, we started Vendor. Vendor was a pioneer in SaaS e-commerce, so it was one of the first SaaS platform for e-commerce, which was sold to NetSuite in 2013. Sorry, but I left the company after a while in around 2007-8, and then I started doing other stuff. So I then moved on the other side of the table, being a retailer myself. At various companies, my own company, which was my third startup at that point, but also being CTO at other companies like Yux, which is now Yux Net-a-Porter, as well as smaller company like Alex and Alexa, a fast-growing, fashion retailer for kids, basically Net-a-Porter for the kids. And that's where I had the idea for Akoova when I was CTO there. In 2013, I started Akoova. So that's my life in a nutshell.
And why did you decide to found Akoova? Like, what was the problem that you were trying to solve?
Well, Akoova, the idea of Akoova started. The genesis was when I was at Yux. Yux is a fairly large company. Many people know it as a B2C company selling fashion to customers, but a good chunk of their business also comes from providing fully managed service to other fashion brands like Marni, Armani, Diesel, and so on and so forth. And what I was trying to do there was trying to create a SaaS platform so that could be used by these what I called mono brands, a platform which was more kind of flexible and adaptable to their needs and so on. And at that time, we were working out something around using Magento. Magento is an open source or closed source e-commerce platform, and very popular. And at that time, as I was developing this platform around Magento, I already saw a few issues around in the market around running Magento or hosting or on the cloud. When I was at Alexa, they were also using Magento, and I must say at that time I had quite a miserable life for a few months because we had lots of problems around hosting Magento, scaling, and so on. Um, um, Luckily, we sorted everything out, but the overall experience was quite frustrating, I must say, even for me, who I was a fairly experienced CTO. And I thought, what do other people do about it? How do they solve this problem? Um, and then I found out that actually many people do suffer from these type of problems around hosting, Magento, and so on. And it was quite interesting to see how unevolved the e-commerce industry was in that space. I come from a SaaS industry, obviously, so I knew SaaS very well. And what we were doing with Magento was pretty much the opposite of SaaS in a way. You have to have your own platform, you build a site on top of it, and you have to manage everything rather than having a third party managing most of the technical parts for you. And what was clear to me is that in the market, there was this kind of, um, you could look at it as a spectrum. On one end, you have SaaS, the likes of Bend at the time, or Demandware, Salesforce, or BigCommerce, Shopify, and so on. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the kind of platforms such as Hybris or Magento, many others, who that you can use or you can license, and then you have to run them yourself. So you need to have the developers, you need to have the agency, you have to host and everything else. So you have these two extremes in the spectrum, and there seemed to be nothing in between. And when I looked at different industries, such, for example, content management system, and I looked at similar products such as Akoova, for example, for Drupal, or you could find companies such as WP Engine to host professionally WordPress. So there were solutions there in that market, but not in e-commerce, which was bizarre because obviously there is a much more need of those things in e-commerce because there is a tight relationship between performance, uptime, and money that the site can produce. So out of their frustration, by looking at the market, that's where the idea came. Basically, it was something. Basically, I thought there is the opportunity, both in market terms, but also in terms of pain point out there, to build something that solves this problem around managing and running Magento on the cloud and managing the overall technical operations, and be able to kind of define a new segment within a market which in e-commerce wasn't there, basically.
Let's talk about turning ideas into products. So you understand you had that problem, you wanted to start the business, but how do you turn that idea then into the product? What were the steps that you took to get there, to having the product realized?
Yeah, I must say, when I started, I wasn't planning to do another startup. This is my fourth startup, and each startup it can be hard on their own. So, I had a family, kids, and maybe I just wanted to have the CTO life, get a good salary, and that's it, right? And enjoy your life. But it was interesting when this opportunity kind of came to me, and I was thinking, I said, this is incredible. And but obviously, at the same time, you're absolutely right. I stopped for a moment. I said, I think that this is a problem that many other people have. But what if it's me just being me? Maybe I'm too picky, too fussy. I'm making too much of a fuss about these kind of things, and I'm magnifying this problem. So what I did is to actually go out and actually trying to see whether there was a problem that other people were facing. So I got back in touch with someone I knew who was a head of e-commerce at a company. And I started chatting with him. And then the guy was telling me that actually they were using Magento and they were having lots of problems. I said, okay, interesting. This sounds familiar. Okay, why don't I try to help you out? So I did. And the kind of problems I found was what I was kind of expecting. Or let's say what I was seeing was I set as an hypothesis, okay, at that time. And this was exactly the case. They were having problems. Their site was managed by an agency, but agency was maybe good for development, but not very good at technical operations. So they were struggling. They were doing it on the side as a hobby and not really doing a good job. Now, without realizing, they were having actually a massive problem. It was like for them driving a car with a handbrake on, basically. And as soon as we start solving the problem, we could actually start seeing their business flying. In a matter of just 5 months, they went from £500,000 a month revenue to 1.5 million. It was magnificent to see that. Maybe that's an extreme example, but it was telling. And at that point, then I said, okay, I've helped you out. But now you need to get someone that looks after these technical operations and hosting stuff properly. Okay, don't just leave in the hands of a developer trying to second guess what to do. And then I told the MD of the company, look, by the way, I'm thinking of setting up this business. Would you like to become our first customer if I did that? And he said, absolutely. So basically what happened there, they had a problem. They were not really aware of the problem themselves. So what I did, I just basically made them aware of the problem. I also gave them a solution. They saw the results, and then they understood that there was a problem in that, modify a gap, basically, they had to be filled. And so they became the first customer. So I managed to get the first customer before even starting the business. I then incorporated the company. At that time, I was also talking to my co-founder, Zach Stevens, who I worked with when I was at Vendor, was one of my best hire when I was at Vendor. He was a technical architect there. And I got back in touch with him. He was freelancing after leaving Vendor, and he helped me out, Alex and Alexa, and we kind of reached the same conclusion that what was happening in the industry was quite bizarre, was mind-blowing in a way, and that there was a gap to be filled there. So we decided to start the company. At that time, we called it Elastera. We then rebranded the company. And then we started building the actual platform, an automated platform on top of AWS. So we chosen AWS as a place to build our platform on top of. And within 5 months, so we started in May 2013, at the end of May 2013, and around on the beginning of October, we actually launched our first product, our first MVP in a way, minimum viable product, and we migrated that first customer over to us. So during that time, we were looking after them. They were on Rackspace and just make sure everything was, kept going for them. And then we migrated them over. And everything was absolutely fantastic since then. And then they went, as I told you, from doing £500,000 per month when we met them. After 18 months, they were making £5 million a month. So they improved their revenue by 10-fold in 18 months, which was quite interesting. And then for one client to the next client.
Was that from 500,000 a month to 5 million a month? What's their line of business? What are they doing, and should we get into that?
Yes, furnitures. So a kind of replica furnitures. Okay. I don't know what happened to them. Unfortunately, they had a few problems. I think to do with the law in England. They changed, all to do with the copyright and IP around designs and things like that. They had to move to Ireland. I don't know what happened to them. It was a bit messy in a way, yeah. But the business was really good. Obviously, the 5 million was helped by the products having a high average order value. But it was a quite interesting growth unusual, to be honest with you, but very interesting.
From that first customer, how did you get your first 100 customers? Like how, what did this, what was the plan there? What were some of the things and the tactics you used to grow your business?
Yes, well, we don't have 100 customers, unfortunately, and the reason for that is because, or not yet, and the reason for that is because when we started, we identified as the key market the mid-large enterprise. And I can tell you a little bit more about it, about the go-to-market and so on. But it was a matter of me, an ex-CTO, becoming the CEO and trying to do his best at selling stuff, basically. And to be honest with you, I must say I've learned a lot around selling by observing probably, some really good salespeople like Dan Wagner and other people. When at Venda, very often I was a kind of CTO who wasn't afraid to go out and meet clients, being involved in pre-sales quite a lot. So that gave me the opportunity to observe and learn from the best, and also learn the good and the bad in a way. And so I found my own style, based on honesty, based on creating value, but at the same time, with an element of assertiveness and fun, and doing sales not just not looking at sales just as closing, but as providing value to customers. And one client led to the second, and then the second to the third, and initially was word of mouth. The first 15 clients were all closed by myself. So I did all of them myself one by one. And then I hired a head of sales. And then obviously I started delegating things to salespeople. But even today, I'm still involved in the sales and marketing and branding, all these kind of things.
So from acquiring, let's say, the first 15, so through word of mouth, and given that you're sort of like mid to enterprise level customer sort of target, now does Akoova, how are you acquiring your customers? Are you doing, is it, outbound, cold calling, do content marketing? What's the strategy, ABM, etc.?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So when we started, there was word of mouth, but there was a good element, although it was at a very small scale, as me on my spare time, kind of trying to do these kind of things. But was very clear from the beginning that inbound was kind of working, outbound was working, and channel, as in partnership, was also working. In fact, when I looked at the first 10, 15 sales, we're actually almost like one third, a third inbound, a third outbound, a third channels. Now, on one hand, that's a beautiful thing to have. On the other hand, it's a problem, because when you're a startup, you can't, especially we were not very massively founded. After we bootstrapped the company, by the way, and after 1 year, we, or less, almost, 11 months, we then raised a seed round. Okay. And then we made the company break even after 1 year. That was by design. We decided to run the business in that way. So what that meant is that we didn't have infinite resources. Quite the opposite. So we had to focus. And when you have an outbound strategy that works, an inbound strategy that can also work, and channel can also work, it becomes a problem, because you can't spread yourself too thin. But what we did is, I didn't want to close any doors, so we kind of kept doing all of it. Maybe I did less of inbound, because we were marketing mid-large customers, and with those people, it's yes, inbound might help in terms of generating awareness, but then it's all about closing deals, and you have to go through a process, and the life cycle of a sales of a deal can go from a few weeks to a few months to sometimes a year, 2 years. And also what I've seen with the time, which I was expecting, to be honest with you, is a shift to channels and partnerships. So channel becoming more and more relevant. And that's kind of also almost kind of organic and normal. I was expecting it. So I'll give you actually an example. Now, this Monday, a new person started in the company, a marketing manager. We didn't have anyone in marketing. We just had sales and myself and a person, kind of a chief strategy, fractional chief strategy, doing all the branding for us. And I was thinking, shall I go down the sales, get more salespeople, or shall I go down a different route? And I talked to various people from the top guns at Klarna to other companies and so on, and also to get their opinion, but also using my kind of critical thinking, observation, and what I realized that the classic playbook of sales is not really working anymore, and especially in our case, obviously, where we have a kind of high touch sales kind of process. An account-based marketing kind of approach would work best. So our effort is really going into branding and going into targeting accounts, mapping the accounts, know them inside out, and the key, and that's maybe could be a tip for some people out there. I think the key is remembering one thing: a warm introduction is worth 1,000 cold calls. So if you have a way to get to a prospect, a lead, through some warm introduction to other partners or whatever, that makes life so much easier.
Yeah, no, definitely a great tip there. One I fully subscribe to. I guess moving from that tip to maybe some of the other key learnings that you've had in running the business to date. Are there any kind of if you could distill it down to, which is quite difficult, but to a couple of key learnings to share, what would they be?
Okay, so one of them would be very deliberate about your first job. Now, this is not for people starting a company, obviously, but anyone who gets into the job market in the first place. Be very deliberate. Their experience is extremely important. That sets the scene for what happens next. Okay, as I said, I was extremely fortunate to work in a research center. And I've learned some very valuable lessons. You might say that's not a real business. It isn't. But it taught me a few things. It taught me about the scientific method. So, for example, before jumping into this kind of thing, go and see things by yourself, verify, get a first customer before. And now this kind of thing are becoming quite popular with lean startup and all this kind of thing, which is great. So be scientific about things. It's not just about the data, by the way, because very often, especially in B2B, you don't have the luxury of receiving lots of data and use statistical method to try to understand what's happening. In B2B, it's about looking people in the eyes and trying to understand what's going on. So be deliberate about your first work experience. Absolutely develop critical thinking, and develop system thinking. That's so important in life in general, in business, and everything else. What other learning? We have inevitably, everyone have setbacks. That happens. Mistakes happen. Setbacks happens. Just it's part of the journey. Don't worry. Just keep going. No worry at all. The other thing is, a few times I had my alarm bells. I get into something and I can hear an alarm bell and I know something is not right. As few times I didn't listen to the bell, and the inevitable happened. It was a mistake. So when you have the alarm bell, listen to it. It's there for a reason. Try to understand why that's happening and what that's ringing. Um, and the other thing, don't just take everything for granted. Again, develop the critical thinking and apply the critical thinking. I'll give you an example. How business typically are run. Honestly, they're just amazingly bad. Um, you have manager leadership saying, "Don't bring me problem. Bring me solutions." That's bullshit. It's totally the opposite. Don't take these kind of things for granted. In my company at Akoova, we say no problem is a problem. If you don't see a problem, if there is no problem for you, that's a problem. You're not looking hard enough. And funding problems is extremely important to us. And yes, those are some of the learnings. And some other learnings maybe could be around, yeah, I mean, with vendor, for example, I had a very different journey with being VC backed. We went through the C's, Series A, B, C, D, and all the alphabets. And where with Akoova, say we did a seed raise, and that was it. I didn't go through the VC path. And so some learning there is, yeah, be careful, and again, be deliberate about what you're expecting from your business, what you want to do with it, and don't be obsessed about things like valuation. Careful there, because sometimes I see people being obsessed about valuation of the company, and they end up doing the wrong things. Yeah, that's a pity. And yeah, another learning kind of in life as well as in business is to, very often people are concerned on or focused on keeping an eye on the price, okay, focused on the results. And that's, and you can see this kind of thing from school. I have the kids now, 11 plus, and all this kind of thing. It's all about the results, the outcome. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. The result, it's a byproduct. And that byproduct comes from what you do on an everyday basis. So don't focus on the result, focus on what produces the result, on what you do on a daily basis. And on how you practice whatever it is that you do, being that sports or music or running a business or whatever passion that you have. The daily practice is so important. Actually, then, sorry if every time I talk about something that brings something else in mind, it's very often I see even people that they trying to make change either to themselves, if they say I want to change as a person, or I want to change the business, or whatever it is, or wants to get better on something. And very often people think of it as, okay, first of all, I need to think about what do I need to do. So they're trying to change the way they think about things. And then with that, they think that they can then change things. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. There is a saying, it says, you don't think yourself into a new way of acting, but you act yourself in a new way of thinking. So basically what that means is the practice of daily improvement, is the practice, is what you do every day that forms your thinking. It's a bit like what I said at the beginning. Who is Osvaldo Spadano? I'm the byproduct of my own experience. Yeah, so that's those are few learning from my side.
Amazing. No, thanks for sharing those, and definitely agree with those points. But in terms of, I guess, on the learning side, for your own personal learning, I always ask about your favorite business book. So, have you a particular one that's been helpful for you?
Yes. One thing actually really changed me. Really, it kind of set me on my own journey. Basically, has been in the early 2000 when I started Venda. And at that time, honestly, I had a massive problem I had with myself. starting these things. Nowadays, people call it SaaS platform. We didn't have that name at that time. And I had a fairly difficult problem to solve. And then I knew that the kind of IT software industry didn't have an answer to those problems. And therefore, I looked outside IT. And that's, again, my research background came in, looking, researching, trying to understand things. And what was interesting by looking at other kind of industries, and one of them was automotive industry. Basically, the problem I had was about how can you create a product and make it mass customizable. Okay, one product that many people use, hundreds, thousands, but then be able to customize it so that it fits every single different business need. And then I came across the automotive industry, and then by looking into it, I came across what they call Toyota production system, and then the lean thinking around that. It was developed in the late 80s and so on. And they came, actually, I remember, after I finished doing some business study, postgraduate diploma on business and so on. And I realized that the kind of thing I was kind of learning as kind of business school were so outdated. And therefore, I would say one of my best books will actually be this one, Lean Solutions, but there are others, obviously, from James Womack and Dan Jones. They are basically the fathers of Lean. And by the way, Dan Jones is also one of my investors and advisors for the company. And in a way, Akoova is a lean experiment, believe it or not, and it's fun. So yeah, Lean Solutions is probably one of the most impactful books.
Amazing.
To my journey and my learning as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Surprisingly, I've not heard of that. I mean, obviously, I've read Lean Startup. It's probably maybe the more well-known, or maybe it's not, but sort of read that many years ago. But definitely will look to check that out. So I love finding new books that I've not heard of, and I'm sure the same for the audience as well. Well, look, we come to the end of the time there, Ozzy. Really appreciate you sharing your story of Akoova and the lessons learned to date, and all these great kind of tips. Where can people find you online, learn more about you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn and somehow on Twitter as well. On LinkedIn, it's Osvaldo Spadano. It's a quite difficult one to spell, I guess. But if you look for Ozzy, OSSY, on Twitter, for example, you will find me. My name is Osvaldo Spadano, but look for Ozzy. Typically, you can find me either on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Ozzy, for joining us on the SaaS Revolution show today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, learning from you, and thanks for sharing your story.
My pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much.